name is Nick Mellors. I'm the Regional Manager for the UK Science and Innovation Network, and I'm very pleased to welcome everybody here today for this, the fourth in our series of Newton for Climate webinars. We're now only a few days away from the start of the COP26 climate negotiations in Glasgow, so it's a great time to be holding this event, and it's obviously a really topical issue that we're going to be addressing today. As we all know, climate change is affecting every country in the world. We're seeing increases in sea levels, we're seeing more extreme weather, we're seeing more frequent flooding and droughts all over the world. And we know that if we leave climate change unchecked, and if we let temperatures rise above 3 degrees Celsius over the coming century, it will adversely affect every ecosystem and economies around the world. And to address climate change, every country has to vastly increase its efforts. Much is happening around the world already. We're seeing record investments in renewable energy. We're seeing investments to transform industry and how we grow food and how we conduct our agriculture. And all of that is going to be very necessary if we're to limit global temperature increases to under 1.5 degrees Celsius. The COP26 climate conference in Glasgow next week will bring countries together from all over the world to try to accelerate action on climate change. We want to make sure the goals of the Paris Agreement that was made in 2015 are kept, and to support the United Nations International Framework Convention on Climate Change. But if our efforts at COP26 are to succeed, we need science and technology to step up and provide the practical solutions that will make it possible for the world to reduce our carbon emissions. And so I'm delighted that today we're continuing this series of webinars, which will demonstrate the impact of successful joint research funded by the UK and Turkish governments under the Newton Çelebi Fund. We're going to talk about our speakers' experience. Sorry, I had some feedback there. Could I ask that everyone has their microphones turned off? Thank you. So, as I was saying, we're going to talk about our speakers' experience in the Newton Çelebi Fund, the problems they're addressing with their research, and their achievements. The Newton Fund is a unique program that aims to build research and innovation partnerships with 17 countries around the world to support economic development and social welfare, tackle global challenges, and develop talent and careers. And the grants under the Newton Çelebi Fund have included fellowships, joint research projects, PhD fellowships, mobility grants, entrepreneurship trainings, and workshop grants. In Turkey, the UK is working very closely with the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey, or TÜBİTAK, as our main partner under the fund. And since 2014, the fund has provided nearly £30 million to more than 450 projects. This webinar today is our fourth and final webinar in the Newton for Climate series. If you missed any of the first three webinars, you can always watch them on the YouTube channel of the British Embassy in Ankara. As we go along through this talk, please do ask any questions to our speakers via the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and I will pick some of those out to ask to our speakers at the end. But now I'd like to introduce our speakers who have received funding from the Research Environments Linked Grant of the British Council under the Newton Fund. First, Alison Smith is a Professor of Plant Biochemistry in the Department of Plant Sciences at the University of Cambridge. She is also a council member of the Marine Biological Association of the United Kingdom and a member of the board of the National Institute of Agricultural Botany. Her research investigates the metabolism of plants, algae, and bacteria, in particular vitamin and cofactor biosynthesis. And her studies have covered the potential for metabolic engineering of high-value products in plants and algae and other biotechnical uses of algae, such as for biodiesel production. Our second speaker, Dr. Berat Haznedaroglu, is an assistant professor at the Institute of Environmental Sciences at Bogazici University. And he focuses on algal biotechnology for nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, biofuels, food and environmental applications. And his research group, known as the Haznedaroglu Lab, consists of researchers from various disciplines who try to address problems pertaining to food, energy, and water by utilizing fundamental bioprocess engineering and systems biology tools. He's also the founder of the Istanbul Microalgae Biotechnologies Research and Development Center at Bogazici University. And welcome to our speakers. I know both of you collaborated under the Newton Fund for the first time actually in 2015, but today we're going to ask to focus on your second Newton project, which was the joint consortium on algal biotechnology for the Bioeconomy-Driven Future in today's webinar. So now I'm going to give the floor to our speakers to introduce themselves and give a quick introduction to their joint research under the Newton Fund.
Thank you so much, Nick, and welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share our collaborative project with Professor Smith at University of Cambridge. I actually have a pretty short presentation. Do you mind if I share that with everyone? It's just like for probably 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can start chatting. I hope everyone can see it as a single screen. Is that showing up okay for everybody?
We could see that, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So Nick, you have already introduced us, thank you so much. I'm basically an assistant professor at Boğaziçi University and running the Istanbul Microalgae Biotechnologies Research and Development Center with Professor Dr. Alison Smith at University of Cambridge. We had the joint consortium on algal biotechnology for bioeconomy-driven future. Today, we just wanted to give you a quick glance on what this project is about, which is funded by the Newton Fund under Research Environmental Links through the British Council. So we believe that both Professor Smith and myself work with microalgae. And we believe that microalgae are actually is a part of the solution to our macro problems that we face today. There's actually a list in here, as you can see. This starts with energy, water, food, environment, poverty, terrorism, war, disease, education, democracy, and population. And obviously, there's, we fully agree on these macro problems that humanity is facing today. However, if you look at like the top 4 of these, we're talking about energy, water, food, and environment, which are directly connected with each other. Population is at number 10, and we all know the current trends, the projections of the human population is going. We're already at the verge of 8 billion. Soon will be 9 million, and with the projections going on by 2050, we'll be achieving about 10 billion, and which means, as we know, this is more energy requirement, more water, and more food for everyone. Meanwhile, we are still relying heavily on non-renewable energy resources. I mean, if you look at oil, coal, natural gas, traditional wood, this is still the 90% of the world's energy requirements. And again, as the world population increases, our demand on the energy will put more pressure on the traditional fossil fuels, which, as we all know in here today, it is causing the global climate crisis. The last month's readings are about 413 ppm. We had a little bit of like decrease because of the COVID pandemic, but each year we are actually still increasing about 2 to 3 parts per million of carbon dioxide each year. So what this means is, Nick, in the opening, you have mentioned that the global climate crisis is causing many, many different extreme events throughout the world. Some regions are experiencing heavy droughts. We started to see these huge collapses of the groundwater levels. floods in certain regions. Turkey actually experienced many unfortunate wildfires this summer. This was again the case in Australia last year. California was exactly the same. So this means that global climate crisis actually also affecting our, there's a big risk for food reserves because we are losing our fertile land. We're losing livestock grazing areas. Floods are causing erosion. So this puts more and more pressure to all of our major problems becomes, a huge risk to access both safe water, safe food, and also sustainable energy. So what we've been trying to do in collaboration with Alison's group at Cambridge is, again, like I said, we believe that microalgae or microalgae, I usually do this on the American English, so I apologize from everyone if I keep confusing them. Microalgae are basically, we believe they are the micro solutions to these macro problems. Why? And here you see some of the algae species that we work with. They do one of the most efficient photosynthesis among all plants and other photosynthetic organisms. And because of this high efficiency, they grow really fast. And microalgae are aquatic species. They grow in water, so they don't really compete with, because when we look at several different alternatives among the biomass, which actually carry a great advantage, a great resource in order to generate alternatives for fossil-based raw material. There are several different options, like energy crops, different food crops, etc., which generates like a lot of oil for biofuel purposes, a lot of protein, plant-based protein as an alternative to red meat. Algae is only one of those candidates. But when you compare them to traditional crops, they grow really fast. Algae grows about 2 to 3 weeks per batch, and they don't need arable land. So they don't need to compete with the traditional food crops and also bioenergy crops with respect to the land that is required to grow these cultures. We have both saline and freshwater species, especially the ones that grow in the marine water, also are much more water efficient because we just get the water from sea. So we don't put additional water stress on our valuable water resources. When you grow algae, we use several different reactor systems, open ponds, closed reactor system. I'll show you a few more images as well. One of the great advantage of algae is this high growth rate and the efficient photosynthesis allows them to capture carbon dioxide, which is more than actually what land plants can do. So algae production can actually tap into waste CO2 resources like all flue gas reserves, which might come from power generation units, petrochemical industries, oil refining. And just like other plants too, algae do require nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers. And these resources also can come from waste effluents, such as like municipal wastewater, animal husbandry, food processing, or other similar industrial or agricultural processing, which has a lot of like nitrogen and phosphorus as excess. So CO2 from flue gas and nitrogen and phosphorus from a different waste resource puts algae not only sustainable, but also a contributor to circular economy, because we can make use of all these wastes. So all the CO2 basically during the photosynthesis of algae does help reduce our emissions coming from many different industries. And what's really happening is algae not only captures this carbon dioxide, but so compared to most traditional carbon capture and sequestration technologies, which is a great tool against the fight for the global climate crisis, algae also does carbon capture, but also utilizes these for many different products. These include aquaculture feeds as the biomass itself once they are being grown, biofertilizers. They can accumulate starch, which can be fermented into bioethanol. Bioethanol is used as a supplement for traditional benzene, which has been distilled from petroleum. One of the great features of algae is they accumulate a lot of lipids, and lipids can be a precursor molecule for biodiesel applications, biojet fuels, biochemicals, various biochemicals, and bioplastics. There's also proteins and vitamins which are being synthesized by certain microalgae species, and these actually find applications in nutritional food supplements, cosmetic sectors, and similar. So algae, if you look at it here, algae can actually produce either raw material as the biomass itself, or the biocompounds that they accumulate for many, many different locomotive sectors. Okay. The goals of the Newton Fund project that we had, basically to join the forces of the two respective centers. This was the Algal Innovation Center at the University of Cambridge, directed by Alison, and the Istanbul Microalgae Biotechnology Research Center, which has been directed by myself. So what we've been trying to do is we basically, both in UK and Turkey, and this is of course for everybody, try to utilize algal biomass as an alternative for non-renewable biomass, non-renewable sources, okay? And we were targeting energy, food, agriculture, environment, and health sectors. So basically, we wanted to provide not only sustainable, so this was one of our challenges because algae is a sustainable resource, but also to provide economically feasible raw materials based on algae, okay? And of course, we had targeted to engage with the stakeholders from the public institutions, private entities, and also the community to basically, as a general, introduce them to the algal biotechnological field, what we can do with it, and how we can support local, national, and international SMEs, non-governmental organizations, and also the government bodies. The activities that we had with this project was generally, promote the institutional capacity and also conduct an interdisciplinary research activities. We wanted to improve the existing capacity of our laboratories to showcase all these products at demo scale, and in some cases, I'll show very briefly today, at large production scales. We wanted to provide test analysis services for all the interested parties, especially the SMEs, organize workshops and training programs for people who had different levels of algae background, starting from novice, like beginners, to more advanced users. We also plan communication dissemination activities, again, targeting stakeholders and SMEs. So what we have achieved with the project is, maybe I can turn over to Alison to just say a few words about their center. I know that they have established the Algal Innovation Center in the Botanical Gardens in relatively recently. So they also have the capability to demonstrate pilot scale activities. Alison, do you want to say a few words about the AIC, maybe at this point, and then I'll continue later on.
Sure, yes. So the Algal Innovation Centre, which is a very large greenhouse in our botanic garden, as you can see here, this was established in 2016 using university money and also money from the European Regional Development Fund, because there was a big push around that time to try and test whether it's possible to grow microalgae in outdoor facilities in Northern Europe, because the theory is that there's never any sun in the UK, and we wanted to prove them wrong. So we established this facility. It has a number of different photobioreactors. I think perhaps Berat will be explaining a bit more detail about photobioreactors, but it's basically enclosed ways of growing microalgae. You can see some in the bottom picture, you can see some hanging plastic bags hanging up, but we also have tubular photobioreactors. And we can go from about 1 litre up to 150 litre in one vessel. And this enables us to test a whole range of different sustainable solutions. We interact with both academic colleagues and with SMEs to trial different approaches. We can harvest the microalgae in this facility. And we also have lots of analytical equipment, actually not in that facility, but in our department nearby, which enables us to determine the metabolic content of the different microalgal strains that we grow. And last, but definitely not least, it's a licensed facility for non-native algal species, because we're interested in being able to look at algae from different places around the world, and also for genetically modified microalgae. So if we want to do metabolic engineering, we can actually grow them in this facility, and it's licensed for doing that. It's possible to grow algae at large scale. In fact, we've just finished an experiment showing that it's possible to produce genetically engineered algae at scale, and for them to produce the molecule of interest at the same level as we can in the laboratory. And this is a really important proof of principle for this nascent algal biotech sector. So back to you, Berat. And you'll notice that Berat's greenhouse is a bit bigger than ours.
Just slightly, but again, these was all, I mean, basically the Newton Fund enabled us to collaborate with Alison and her group to transfer that, knowledge that they had at the AIC to the greenhouse we have in Istanbul. Because growing algae at scale is not an easy task. I mean, you're not at the lab scale right now. You're not at the bench scale. Now you are generating, many different products at really high volumes. So when we first started before the Newton Fund, our facility was only can generate about 3.5 tons of algae per batch. Now the new greenhouse actually enables us, you see some examples of different reactor systems. We can actually achieve about 110 tons per batch, all thanks to actually the knowledge that has been shared through Alison's group at Cambridge. Of course, we want to demonstrate something useful for everybody. So the new facility, you're just seeing an artist's sketch. This has been drawn by one of my students. What we actually are demonstrating probably for the first time over the Europe, and I think this is also maybe the first time in the whole world as well. What we do is, as I explained to you, the algae captures carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. And one of the good things about the site at Boğaziçi University is we are basically operated by a wind turbine on our campus. So we've been already carbon neutral. Our carbon footprint was zero since 2015. With this new greenhouse, I already mentioned some of the products. I'll give you a few more examples. What we achieved here is the algae capturing carbon dioxide during the production of all these products. We actually became carbon negative because we're already powered by a totally renewable energy. So this is, for the first time, we can actually see we go above the carbon neutrality. Now we actually achieve carbon negative production. So which is really, really great. And I think a big milestone in this big fight against the global climate crisis. Our product portfolio, I'm going to fasten a little bit. What we do is the omega-3 fatty acids, basically the fish pills that you're familiar with, is one of the products that we generate because algae are the actual source of generating microalgae-based omega-3s. We can open up this a little more later on if there's any questions. normally the algae that have been eaten by zooplanktons, which are being consumed by smaller fish, do accumulate on larger fish, and omega-3s are extracted from the fish fillets. However, with the environmental issues, heavy metals like mercury, pesticides from agricultural or industrial pollution like dioxins, polychlorinated biphenyls may also accumulate in the fish tissues. So in order to have a clean and also a total vegan, to be precise, source of omega-3s, we can actually directly obtain omega-3s from marine microalgae. This is one of the products that we generate. We work on several antioxidant bioactive compounds. I'll give you a few more examples a little later. And all of these products can actually be utilized in different functional food products. You see some examples in here. Milk is supplemented with omega-3s again. Several smoothies which are high in algae-based proteins, like spirulina is one of the products that we generate, which are actually becoming a great raw material for the alternative red meat products. Algae captures, certain species do capture the nitrogen available in the atmosphere, which can be used to generate biofertilizer. These are a few other products that we work with. Or again, as an alternative to all these processes, we can increase the omega-3 in fish feed, which is given to aquaculture as a support to aquaculture industry. And we have shown that the amount of the omega-3 in the fish feed, if it increases, the omega-3 accumulating in the fish fillet also increases. So these are some of the products, the prototype products that we develop at the biorefinery, like again spirulina. I'm sure this is very well known among the audience today as well. Chlorella, another green algae. The astaxanthin, this is the exact same, the pigment, one of the most strongest antioxidants that are used in order to neutralize reactive oxygen species, which cause many different diseases in humans as well as animals. Phycocyanin, this is one of the blue pigments that we extract from blue-green algae. It is also a very powerful antioxidant, very similar to vitamin C, ascorbic acid. Beta-carotene, the exact same pigment that we see in carrots, the orange bright color in carrots. Algae also generates beta-carotene. Again, compared to carrots, the production line is much faster. Algae grows fast. It's again a great product for many different industries, including like natural food coloring. Omega-3, we have already mentioned omega-6 and omega-9 fatty acids. These are some of a few examples that we generate. Nick also mentioned biofuels. We do generate algae-based biofuels for many different industries. Some of these include jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel, biodiesel. These products can be easily blended with the petroleum-based compounds. Biodiesel up to 15% for the traditional diesel engines. Biojet fuel, in fact, is much higher. As you know, we started talking about the global climate crisis, and this is the Newton for Climate event. The civic aviation is currently responsible for
I can see you again. I can see your screen.
You're muted.
Okay. I hope we are back. Sorry about the technical hiccup. I was telling that the biodiesel can be, this product, for example, is ready to be blended with the traditional diesel up to 15%. We have a biojet fuel product which we are trying to develop for Turkish Airlines and basically all clients that might be interested in. Civil aviation is responsible for currently about 2% of the global carbon dioxide emissions, and the trend is increasing. And the International Air Transport Association would like to switch to sustainable alternative jet fuels and try to decrease their greenhouse gas emissions to, again, help mitigate the carbon dioxide emissions. I mentioned you that we provide test and analysis services. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but for all upstream and downstream, and what I mean by upstream is starting from like the strain improvements. Alison mentioned a great tool. Now they can actually study, engineered algae species as well. So those are all upstream cultivation of all these. And then processing of all these biomass at large scale, we can provide, we can help actually SMEs working at any different stages of algae production. We organize several workshops and training programs. We share these knowledge with a lot of people, including minorities. We had friends from many different countries around the world. We had online and hands-on workshops. You see some of the snapshots from these. Again, we try to communicate and disseminate the knowledge on the algal biotechnology. You just see a few examples, or some of them are in Turkish, but we have, again, international coverage on several different news outlets. We have public talks open to everybody. Some of them are already on YouTube. Alison gave a great podcast to BBC. These are all available. British Council also gave us the opportunity to disseminate some of these knowledge. I mean, these are just a few examples, but you can find them online. And if you drop an email, I'll be more than happy to share the links. And like I said, we try to support local industries, international industries. I'm not, again, going to go into too much detail, but we had great collaborations, especially from UK. These are just a few examples, like Bioeconomy-Driven Future. They are partnered for us for some algae cultivation. Same with Algae. They are located in Bedfordshire. We also have a great platform, Algae UK, supported by the UKRI, Biotechnology and Biological Research Council. Again, these are some other SMEs that we are in touch. Some of them are food companies, some of them are international, like Algae Energy. They are normally based in Spain, but they have branches in Turkey. With incremental steps, we are trying to increase the presence and also the chance that the algal products have in all these important sectors. So this is my last slide, so I probably took a little longer than I should. What I wanted to say is, the audience in here is very familiar with the United Nations global goals for sustainable development. There are 17 of them, and I'm very proud to tell you that with the Newton Fund Research Environmental Links, we are actually addressing, helping 10 different goals out of all these 17. So with that, I would like to thank you. Again, this is a little longer, but I hope it actually set the basis a little bit, maybe for the further discussion and questions. Thank you. And sorry for the technical hiccup, I apologize.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Doctor. That was really interesting. And I'd like to encourage everyone, please do ask any questions you have in the chat bar at the bottom as we go along. Professor Smith, would you like to add anything to what Dr. Haznedaroglu has just presented?
Well, just very briefly to say that one of the things that is really important in trying to push the micro solutions for the macro problems is actually to try things. The algal biotech sector has enormous promise, but actually is very nascent. And in order for us to be able to demonstrate and convince people that these do offer opportunities for solutions, we have to try things. And so the interactions that we've been able to have through the Newton Fund has enabled us to, as I said, my greenhouse is smaller than Berat's greenhouse, and it's stimulating what was it possible to do in Turkey, stimulating what we can do in the UK, and also can demonstrate to our other colleagues in our own countries and also elsewhere in the region what's possible. I saw there was a question in the chat about, can we possibly do large-scale microalgae cultivation in Northern Europe compared to what's being done in Turkey? Well, we don't have the same amount of sunshine, but actually we have lots of algae that grow here. Algae grow everywhere. And it's much more about trying to develop the solutions that work in situ in the particular locations. So yes, I think all these sort of solutions will be possible. And indeed, microalgae cultivation goes on in Northwest Europe at the moment. It's just on a very small scale, and the potential is underexploited.
And just to pick up on a couple of the points you've made there, I mean, you've described this as being a nascent industry. I mean, what are the steps you think need to happen now in order to achieve this kind of project at scale that is commercially sustainable? I noticed Dr. Haznedaroglu mentioned, you're already working with some companies that are providing products in different areas that are based on algal technology. But yeah, I mean, how do you see that developing from now? Who would like to go first?
Over to you, Berat.
So again, we already mentioned that there are you have seen some examples. There's a great application for the energy sector, biofuels, functional food. In fact, I think Lorraine asked a question about the functional food. Yeah, the product algae can accumulate a lot of plant-based proteins. So they are actually great. They carry a great advantage. Because red meat production, conventional industrial red meat production, also puts a lot of stress with respect to all the methane and energy requirements, carbon dioxide. So in order to have a sustainable alternative to that process, algae-based proteins can actually be a great functional food application. Some strain, I'll leave the vitamin question to Alison, because Alison is more expert, because she's also working on that as well. We already talked about omega-3s. There are all these you have seen a few examples, astaxanthin, the phycocyanin, all these pigments accumulated by algae. They are great functional food ingredients. So there's a big application for the food industry. Alison, maybe you can comment on the vitamins. There was a question by Lorraine.
Yeah, so plant-based food is very good in vitamins, and in fact, if you eat lots of leafy green vegetables, you get a good supply of many B vitamins, of vitamin C, and so on. And algae are essentially like leaves. They contain very high levels of those in proportion to the other components. But actually, microalgae also accumulate vitamin B12, which plants don't make. So that's the one vitamin that you can't get from plants, but algae are a good source of that. So that's a sort of added bonus for consuming algae rather than plants. I think, Nick, you were asking about what's needed in order for us to go from so there's another question from Pinar about what technology readiness level are we? I mean, already algae are grown commercially. It's just at a very small niche scale. It's grown, for example, for fish feed. But in order to take advantage of the potential and do things in the way that Berat was showing, the many different outputs, but also in a sort of circular economy where you can deal with waste streams like flue gas or other waste streams of wastewater, for example. in order to do that, we have to have proof of principle demonstrations, because we already have very effective processes, and it's hard to break into those sectors with this new technology. And it's the added value, I would say, that you can get from including microalgae that you can't get from the other processes, which is the unique selling point. And so that's something which we're very keen on demonstrating. In other words, you don't have to just have them as part of one process. They can be modular, for example, dealing with wastewater, or supporting the anaerobic digestion, or producing lipids and omega-3s, and so on. And I think, in a way, we have a blank piece of paper, which is an advantage. We can say, in this location, we have this waste stream, we have this need. Can we incorporate growing microalgae in the process and get added value? So that would be my approach.
Thank you very much. And it strikes me as well, you know, as you said, it's about finding the niche. There are so many potential applications as well for algae, as you discussed earlier. But coming back to a point you made before, Professor, about the suitability of different climates and different strains of algae being more suited to different climates. I mean, do we see any difference in the applications that different strains would be used for? For example, in Northern Europe, the algae that we can grow there, would that be used for different things than the algae in more Mediterranean climates, for example?
Almost certainly. I mean, I think there are very, very many different algae, and we probably cultivate, I can't remember how many you showed in your picture. I think maybe it was 10, but there's 300,000 different possibilities. So I think there's quite a lot of scope. And actually, we can have the same species that grows in the UK, and it will have different characteristics from that species grown in Turkey. And that's what I mean about trying to adapt the, not adapt, but to utilize the appropriate algal strain for the appropriate application. I think if you want to make biofuels, you have to grow microalgae at a massive scale. I mean, massive scale. And so another question is about what's the biggest challenge? Well, it does depend on the output. I think in order to grow things at the scale that you would need for biofuels, you would need very large land areas to capture, because it's more difficult to scale on volume for algae because of light penetration. So you'd need sort of open areas. You'd need facilities to provide CO2, you need facilities to harvest and so on. That's not going to happen in the UK. It's far too crowded. We don't have enough sunlight and so on. And probably it'd be difficult in Turkey, but maybe it's appropriate in more, arid areas or desert areas where, as long as there's enough, say, low-grade water, brine water or seawater, it would be possible to cultivate them. So that doesn't directly answer your question, but I think the point is we are at the point of saying, what is it you'd like? Let's try and develop the technology, rather than saying, here's our technology and we can do one or two things.
Yeah, Nick, when you actually, we have a great audience there. When you start walking, taking a hike in the nature, you see algae everywhere. So, my feeling is there might be the right algae for the right purpose. I mean, we call this bioprospecting. We always keep prospecting for these interesting algae species. And, they are acclimated to many, many different climates. I mean, Alison, we don't have a chance to talk about this today, but Alison's group members have been visited Antarctica to sample the algae species that grow in Antarctica, which are really, really cold adapted strains. We have similar strains in Turkey, which can be actually cultivated outside, even at freezing conditions. The right thing is actually what useful product that we can extract from those algae. Sometimes these are protein-based products. which can be used for food applications. Sometimes these are oil, like lipids-bearing algae, which can be used for biofuel purposes. What we also have tried to do with our Newton collaboration is, can we actually do more than one product from the same algae? So if it is a protein-based product, can we do something with the remaining lipids or remaining carbohydrates can be used for something? And that's the biorefinery approach. And most oftenly, you know, one of the products, there's usually a prime product, and there's usually something that you might be able to do with the residual biomass. This could be, for example, biofertilizer or etc. That's the other stuff that we're actually trying to achieve.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm just looking in the chat bar and I can see a couple of follow-up questions on this theme. So one question, are there any applications for using products obtained from algae as white technical process oil in the elastomer compounding industry? Another one, can microalgae be used as a sustainable alternative fuel? Yeah, let's start with those two maybe.
Maybe briefly, I can mention a little bit. Yes, there is actually, you know, we haven't talked much today. You know, algae, especially the, you know, when we talk about algae, sometimes we exclude, sometimes we include the blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, photosynthetic microorganisms. Cyanobacteria, in fact, you know, if we count them as one of the main algae, because they are, you know, they are the ancestors. Cyanobacteria are ancestors of microalgae species. They do accumulate bioplastics, compounds that can be used as biodegradable plastic material. So there's quite a bit of like applications which is available for, again, plastics that are being used in automotive industry, bioplastics, plastics for the, you know, water bottles. I know that there are some examples for those as well. So there's you know, there's some applications. The second question was the biofuels. Yes, I mean, you already mentioned, again, algae makes a lot of lipids. Lipids are the main, you know, input material for obtaining biodiesel. Biodiesel, again, like I said, can be replaced as an alternative for the petroleum diesel. Right now, we're also working on biojet fuel as an alternative to Jet A1. We already mentioned, you know, starch. Some species accumulate, you know, large volumes of starch. Starch can be fermented into bioethanol. So they, you know, biofuel applications are vast. The issue is, been also mentioned, like, you know, what is the biggest the challenge? You have seen the images. Algae are grown in water. So the densities are relatively low. So you need to harvest all these algae from a vast body of water. So you have to spend a lot of energy. That's one of the biggest challenges, you know, against them becoming economically feasible. That's why we have developed these projects. Can we do this in a, you know, renewable way? Can we generate energy from wind turbine? Can we capture more carbon dioxide during these processes? And can we couple a biofuel generating process with something more valuable? Biofuels are the comparably, relatively speaking, with the lowest market value among all the products that you can get from algae. Whereas if you start talking about, again, omega-3s, all these, you know, pigments, their market value increases quite high. Fuels are, of course, strategic for everyone. But from an economical perspective, the products serving food industry, health industry, those are more economically viable.
And maybe I can just elaborate a little bit, because I think one of the biggest problems about growing microalgae is actually we don't have any agronomic knowledge. So we've been growing land plants like wheat, for example, for 10,000 years, and we know how to do that with the appropriate varieties in different locations. We know how much inputs, you know, fertilizers and pesticides and so on. We know how to harvest them in a very efficient way. And we just don't know that for microalgae. And so the idea of starting off the algal biotech sector by growing algae for biodiesel that you need at very large scale, it's high volume, low value, is is probably not very sensible. A much better way of doing it is growing it at small scale for high value products. And so that's really the focus of what we're trying to do, as Berat says, in omega-3s or vitamins. And then that enables you to just to gain understanding of how to cultivate these organisms, prevent disease, deal with fluctuating temperatures and so on. And that's, I think, much more sensible. You can accumulate knowledge, hopefully a bit more rapidly than for wheat, in order that you can then possibly contemplate growing it at a large scale.
Yeah, I can certainly see algae being having a niche in the market in the UK, at least as a supplement or some kind of superfood, maybe. This kind of branding. So I have another question, which is for Professor Smith, which is about the genetic modifications for algae. So I wonder if any research has been done around whether genetic modification can improve algae for specific products or improve the output.
Well, in fact, there's a very active community of algal molecular biologists around the world who are interested in trying to develop ways to engineer microalgae and then traits to manipulate. So I think the question is about improving photosynthesis, and there's definitely interest in doing that. In our laboratory, we are actually focused on trying to develop them as production platforms for high-value products from plants, potential therapeutic or pharmaceutical molecules. That's our particular research focus. But there are strains that have been generated either by genetic modification or by mutagenesis to alter the way in which they can photosynthesize. And all of these things can be tested in our facility.
Brilliant, thank you. So returning to the theme of biodiesel and biofuels, this is from Dr. Haznedaroglu. So algae-based biodiesel can be blended up to 10 to 15%
so normally,
petrol.
Maybe, yeah, I already answered it. Maybe I can elaborate a little more for everybody. So, all car manufacturers have prototypes. Some of them are already commercialized to run 100% biodiesel. Certain companies already has them, especially like in South America, like in Brazil. Brazil made a huge switch to first bioethanol from their sugar canes, and then to biodiesel coming from soybean. So car manufacturers are already ready. For the current, year 2000 and above diesel engines, you can blend up to 10-15% algae-based or any other oil crop-based biodiesel without any issues. Biodiesel is a little more the solvent characteristics of the biodiesel requires no modification on the engine, but the fuel distribution piping needs to be more sturdy. So that's why you need some modifications on the car bodies. For the jet fuels, for example, the blending is much higher. You can blend 50-50 with the standard Jet A1 or Jet A, which is used by the airplanes right now. So they pose a huge advantage. We are making a big switch to electrical engines. They are coming up, but remember, you might actually have an electrical car, but when you go home, the real issue is, once you plug in your car, where is that electricity coming from? If you remember my opening slide, if it is still a fossil-based electricity like coal, natural gas, this is still not a big help for the whole herd. So I think bio-based fuels will still be advantageous for a while. So algae and again other oil bearing crops, especially the ones that are non-food crops, will be very useful for the energy sector.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And if I could sort of ask, slightly more personal questions, maybe, what was it that attracted you to this this field of study originally? I mean, what was it that motivated you, or that you find exciting about this particular field? Maybe Dr. Haznedaroglu first.
Sure. Well, now you actually, you guys also have a feeling of the algae. Again, like I said, they are like the micro solutions to macro problems. I also call them the Swiss Army knife because there's actually a solution to many of these products. So that's what really attracted me to work with algae. They are marvelous organisms. They do photosynthesis. They capture sunlight, capture carbon dioxide, and generate all these, different waste products, which are normally requiring a lot of energy, releasing a lot of carbon footprints when they are, supported from fossil-based fuel. So, the real motivation was the sustainability of algae providing all these valuable products, basically.
I have to admit that I didn't start working on algae because of sustainable solutions at all. They're just the most beautiful organisms if you look at them under the microscope. They are responsible for 50% of all photosynthesis in the world. That's 50% of all oxygen production, but they have a standing biomass that's minute compared to the land-based photosynthetic organisms, land plants, trees, and so on. And so it was intriguing that these organisms, which are incredibly diverse, their metabolism, their genetics, their evolution is absolutely vast, and that's the reason that I studied them. However, subsequently, it became clear that I've been in this game for a long time. So let's say 15 years ago, when algal biofuels started to be promoted again as a solution to the fossil fuel replacements, I kept thinking, well, I can't see that that's going to work very easily because we can't grow them in volumes bigger than about 100 mils. And it's the sort of disjoin between the biology and understanding these organisms, how to manipulate them, and then how to actually, as in the chat, the questions, how do we turn it into something feasible? Well, I would say you should study the organisms and know about them a bit more, rather than just hoping that it will be okay, because it probably won't.
And you also see that the same question of our collaboration, we had a lot of technical knowledge that we transfer from Alison's group, and then turn into more applicable products at large scale. Yeah,
no, we're very complementary. It's been a great interaction. So thank you very much to the Newton Fund, I would say, for allowing this to happen.
Not at all. Thank you. And a last quick question from me. I mean, where next? Where do you see your research on this subject taking you next?
Alison, do you want to
start? Well, I think, as I've said, our interest is in high value products and being able to develop them as production platforms, and that I think there's a great deal of scope for that, but also into food, in particular for the production of high nutrient, either supplements, as you said, or just feedstuffs, and thinking about how to incorporate them into processes that make the actual production system more sustainable. Because I think most processes are geared to optimize and maximize production of one thing, without too much worrying about the waste streams, which get then sorted out afterwards. And I would like to see instead processes being designed from the start as being sustainable. And I think even if they don't include microalgae, it's more to do with the principle that I think is that we can offer as an example. Got a waste stream, we can grow algae on it. Then you've got to think about what to do with the algae, but there are lots of outputs from that.
On our side, I think we actually want to expand these biorefinery options. We want to multi-valorize as much as possible so that we can actually contribute to the economical feasibility of the algal biomass. We don't have a chance to talk with all the products today, but we use algae for wastewater treatment as well, especially industrial wastewater, hard to treat wastewater streams. This is another field that we would like to push forward. The question was, there was some customer question. Yes, we are expanding on bioplastics as well because, we are heavily impacted with conventional plastic industries. So we basically keep working on the exact same field, but with more applications that will touch, help out the other sectors which are strongly dependent on petroleum. So that will be the key for the next sustainability. And if we can demonstrate more and more economical feasibility, I think that the interest and attention towards algae will be improved as well.
Thank you both very much again for joining us today. We are now at the end of our time, sadly. I think there's a lot more we could talk about. But thank you, Dr. Haznedaroglu, Professor Smith, for that really fascinating talk and Q&A on your work. And this does also bring us to the end of our Newton for Climate webinar series. I think over the last month, we've had 4 really fascinating presentations about really how international collaboration in science can give us some of the solutions, at least to solve the climate problem that we face as a shared challenge for humanity. All of the webinars, including this one today, can be found on our YouTube channel for the British Embassy in Ankara. So please do have a look at that, and the information about the speakers and their projects can also be found there. So thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. And we hope to see you again soon for more events on UK-Turkey science collaboration. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for all the